Hey, you want to learn about Humphrey's executor, a case from 1935? Do I have your attention now? Well, the United States Supreme Court is about to toss out Humphrey's executor, apparently, based on a new ruling, which will allow every president, including ones not named Donald Trump, to fire at will everybody on a board, a commission, an agency, all the regulators, all those boards, commissions, and agencies that the Congress created in order to keep them bipartisan, in order to keep them nonpartisan. Say goodbye. They're done. I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen in December after the United States Supreme Court hears oral argument. We go over the reasons why it may not be a bad thing on Legal AF, the podcast. And here's a clip. Karen, home stretch. Why don't you tell the audience about Humphrey's executor and what the Supreme Court has just done, which indicates, I think, to both of us that Humphrey's executor is not long for this world, and what is its impact on federal agencies and commissions and regulatory bodies created by Congress, but are part of the executive branch.
Yeah, so there's certain agencies created by Congress that were meant to be bipartisan or nonpartisan, right? So you want to have you don't want politics infecting decision making in certain agencies. And one of those agencies here is the Federal Trade Commission. And the Federal Trade Commission is an agency that is supposed to be doing what's in the best interest of trade, of consumers, of business, and not necessarily be at the whim of whatever political party is in power. And essentially what it looks like is they are going to, there's a case from almost 100 years ago that people call the Humphrey's executor case involving an FTC commissioner. And basically the case says you can only fire one of these individuals for cause. This is who's sort of one of the commissioners, one of these neutral commissioners. And you can only fire them for cause, meaning they did something wrong while they were on the job, or they're somehow not qualified while they're on the job. You know, they have to have done something wrong. There has to be a reason. And what Donald Trump has been doing, and frankly, the Supreme Court's been allowing in many cases, is that he can fire these commissioners or these board members who are supposed to be protected and who are not supposed to be able to be fired unless there is some sort of cause. And so everyone's been kind of hinting that this Humphrey's executor, this case, this law that is existed, it's going to be overturned because they're hinting at that by allowing certain individuals to be fired by Trump for no reason. And so what is happening now is on an emergency docket, he basically said that in an FTC particular commissioner essentially said, you know what, you can fire her, that you can absolutely fire her. And, you know, in the emergency docket, which means it was not fully briefed, it's not fully argued. It's just one of these emergency kind of, no, there's a stay, I'm staying the stay, and I'm keeping the stay in place, you know, of all, that's how these things bubble up. And the three liberal justices Judge Justice Kagan wrote the dissent, but was joined by Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson, who basically said, we all know what you're doing. You're but do it the right way. At least do it fully briefed. We know you're overruling Humphrey's executor. We know you're basically saying, you know what, this Congress created this law and establishing this agency, but the agency has expanded its powers over all these years since Congress created it. And now it's much more executive branch like, and we know, and so therefore this doesn't apply anymore. And you can do this. And they basically said, look, then do it the right way. Don't do it in this emergency shadow docket here where nothing's briefed. No one knows the reason why. And they essentially overruled a historical precedent, a very, very established precedent that's been around for a long time, and without any briefing, without any reason, without anything. And that's essentially what's happening. And she called them out on it, like she has been all along. So I think this is what's happening here. I'm curious to hear from you, though, why this is different than who you just talked about, right? Why is it that this one they're allowing to be fired, but the other they
Well, I mean, yeah, okay. So there seems to be a limit to how much they are willing to give Donald Trump in terms of power to fire at will everybody in the executive branch. See, the problem is that while Congress creates agencies and departments, and woe be Congress to create another agency or department anytime soon, because now they have to understand that whoever the president is at the time will automatically pack it with political cronies, and there will never be any longer a bipartisan or nonpartisan regulatory agency or commission ever because of the rulings by the United States Supreme Court. Because having granted this stay, keeping Rebecca Slaughter off the CFTC and asking people to brief for November and December term the issue of whether Humphrey's executor is inconsistent with executive power, just saying it out loud. Now, every time Congress creates one of these things, if they ever do it again, they have to acknowledge that they can never require bipartisan, nonpartisan people on there, which I've said, rather than wring our hands as Democrats and non-MAGA and say, oh, another loss at the Supreme Court. Donald Trump won again. He gets everything. I look at it a different way. I see it as a gift that now we're going to use. Okay, we know we had our upset day that there's no longer nonpartisan commissions and agencies. Okay, get over it. There isn't. And so if the Democrats come back into power, or when they do, in 2028, every board and commission, from the NLRB to the Securities and Exchange Commission to the Commodities Futures and Trade Commission to the Federal Trade Commission to the FCC and the rest, except for the Federal Reserve, are going to be occupied with Democrats. And every Republican will be fired on sight. That is what the Supreme Court has allowed us to do, and we now should take full advantage of it and stop wringing our hands over it. So that's that. As to the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, like why? Why is that one different?
Okay, well, you remember the case from May in Gwen Wilcox in the NLRB case. Technically, from an analytical standpoint, there is no difference.
Right.
They have a sliding scale that they use. They say the more executive power that an executive agency or commission created by Congress exercises, the more they're going to allow the president to fire at will and not have any of these things like staggered terms and no one party can occupy more chairs than the other over a period of time. All that's gone if they are found to exercise a lot of executive power, because they think that's inconsistent with the unitary executive model, which means all power is reposited in the office of the president for that branch. So, however, having said that, and so far no agency or commission has passed the test. They found all of them exercise too much executive power to not allow Donald Trump to fire them and reshape those commissions. He hasn't even reshaped them. Some of them he's put out of business. There is no Merit Systems Protection Board because there's only one person on it and there's no quorum. And he hasn't replaced any of the other people. The National Labor Relations Board has no quorum because he hasn't replaced it. They're out of business, which is what he really wanted to do. And I would have thought that on the Federal Reserve, even though it's independent and it was created bipartisan and it's the central bank, that they would bend over backwards to find a way to give it to the president. But they didn't. So when Gwen Wilcox, who was the head of the National Labor Relations Board, argued, if you allow that Trump to fire me, what's next? The Federal Reserve? That could be next, because they kind of threw that argument in there. So when they wrote the decision in May in allowing Donald Trump to fire Gwen Wilcox, they effectively said, no, you're fired. But the Federal Reserve that you raised as an example, we're going to spend a whole paragraph talking about, we're going to protect the Federal Reserve because they were worried about Donald Trump. That was the last line firewall that the Supreme Court put up for whatever reason. And they started with really a historical, a misapplication of history, if that's possible. They said, well, the Federal Reserve is very similar to our first and second banks of the United States. You know, like the Alexander Hamilton banks. And because of that and their unique role in the American government and their independence, we're not going to allow those were created differently, and we're not going to allow the president to fire them except for cause. And then without defining what for cause was. So when we read that, we were like, oh, they're trying to protect Jay Powell. They don't want Jay Powell fired. The question is, what are they going to do with the governor right below Jay Powell? There's 7 of them on the board of governors. And so if we didn't have the Wilcox decision from May, which gave us a window into the thinking of at least 5, if not 6 Supreme Court justices, I would tell you that Lisa Cook's on life support. But we have the benefit of the May decision, which I think is tying them up in knots about how I think some of them want Lisa Cook gone on the Supreme Court. They want him to be able to fire him. But others are saying, is that what we want when the president is a Democrat? And so there's that struggle going on. And this is not just to leave it at this, Karen. This is not about Wilcox, a one person. This is about gaining 9. He gets Gwen Wilcox. He gets 9 out of the 12 votes on the Federal Open Markets Committee, which is more than enough to set interest rates, which is what he wants to do in getting control of monetary. Because the 7 Board of Governors, by majority, pick the 12 members of the Federal Reserve regional banks. And from that 12, 5 serve on the Federal Open Markets Committee, along with the 7 Board of Governors, making a new committee of 12. And right now, he's only got 3 votes out of 12. So he loses every time 9-3 or whatever it's going to be. He wants to flip it the other way. He gets rid of Lisa Cook. He gets 9 votes. He sets interest rates. And then, you'll start bringing in a shopping cart filled with cash to pay for your groceries, because that's what's going to happen with hyperinflation in this country if Donald Trump gets control of the money spigot by setting interest rates at like 1 or 2%, right? Welcome back. I'm Michael Popok, and that was Legal AF, the podcast, every Wednesday and Saturday for the full-length versions at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the MeidasTouch Network. And then pick us up on audio podcast platforms of your choice. If you help us with the downloads on the audio and watch us on YouTube, we'll stay in the top 50 of all podcasts on Apple and Spotify and on YouTube. And that allows us to continue to bring you this content. Want to become a full-fledged card-carrying member of the Legal AF community? Watch the podcast, listen to the podcast, go over to Legal AF, the YouTube channel, and the Legal AF Substack, and consider becoming a paid member. I think we kept it to about $7 a month, and that helps us keep everything that you enjoy on the air. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of MeidasTouch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event, by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states, and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.